Welcome everyone to another episode of the Hooked Head podcast. I'm Adash and joining me again are Vivek and Sambib. How you guys doing?
Yeah, I'm good. Um, Melbourne is still pretty cold as expected, but have had a good weekend. Just the usual chores and stuff, but excited to talk about the latest developments in the automotive industry.
Nice. And Sambib, you went to Perth last weekend. How was that?
Yeah, I quite enjoyed it. It was my first time there. I did a lot of driving, I think I averaged about 300 kilometers of driving every single day. Just rented a
Whoa,
simple Toyota RAV4, but I got to see Perth's roads and the different sort of scenery that it offers.
But
damn, 300 Ks a day. What was the
Yeah,
the
on average.
highlight?
So I would say that 300 Ks a day was mainly swayed by one particular day where I probably did on probably 700 to 800 Ks of driving, which was going to the
what?
Margaret River and back. Yeah, the
Oh my
Margaret River
God.
is about 300 Ks from Perth. So I left at about 8 a.m. and then came back at about 8:30.
So how much time
That's
did you
all.
spend in the Margaret River area?
So I got there at 11 a.m. and then 11 to 5:30. So reasonable, 6.5 hours.
Okay, not
And then,
bad.
but I did a fair bit of driving. There's all the spots are separated, so I still did a bit of driving even within the river, but obviously not like in one go doing 300 kilometers.
Mm,
Jeez. Well,
yeah.
how the driving roads compare to what you used to in
I
Sydney and
mean,
Melbourne?
I only drove. I feel like because there are less cars on the road and the weather, they get less rain than both Melbourne and Sydney. Just because of that, they probably have less potholes and less markings on the road compared to us. On top of that, obviously Perth City itself has is a bit newer, basically, so the roads are a bit newer, and therefore, you can tell on the roads that yeah, the road quality was quite good. I basically didn't encounter any poorly surfaced roads. So yeah, but that's more, as I said, they're a wealthy state with newer roads and less cars and less rain. So yeah,
Yeah, that mining money definitely going to good use
Exactly,
there.
yeah, exactly.
Nice. All right, what are we covering this episode? So, I guess the first topic will be the brand new Mazda CX-5 that was revealed just a couple of days ago. Hugely important product for Mazda. Then we'll talk about Bentley's new EV, the XP15, and we'll talk about their EV aspirations and how they're going to compete and go head to head with the likes of Rolls-Royce. And then finally, we'll talk about the British Grand Prix. Um, Chaotic race, a lot happening, and some bombshell news as well in the world of F1. So let's get into it. Start off with the Mazda CX-5. So, as I mentioned, recently revealed, probably Mazda's most important product globally. Australia's their best-selling model in Australia as well. So it's been a while since they've had a brand new model, and it is quite an evolutionary approach they've taken to the design. Looks quite similar in a lot of ways. Slightly longer and wider, of course, with more rear leg room. Some big changes inside with a complete overhaul of the interior with a big 15.6-inch infotainment display. A huge move away from the button-based and usually non-touchscreen approach they've had in most of their cars. But yeah, some probably disappointing news on the powertrain side of things for now, at least. So yeah, let's dive in. Vivek, what are your thoughts on this crucial new model?
Yeah, so I think this is probably best categorized, to be honest, as like a very heavy facelift than an all-new model. You can see that the styling is definitely an evolution of the existing CX-5 with the Coda design language. Honestly, I am not the biggest fan of the exterior design, especially the front. Like I can see what they're trying to do with they've gone a little bit more aggressive with the DRLs. They've had the grill is a little bit maybe a bit bigger, but then you look at the lower front bumper and it's like they've had like a chin or like the car has like an underbite or something. Like I'm not sure what the best way to describe it is, but it maybe and maybe it looks better in the flesh, but in the photos it just looks a bit off. Like uh, it's maybe this is a funny way to say it, but it looks like it's like either grimacing or it's like suffering from like constipation or something. Like it's just
Wow,
like,
calm down,
it's
Vivek.
just yeah. I'm just not a fan of the front bumper. Like it's just jutting out a bit too much. And then you look at the side profile and the rear profile. The rear profile is sort of very aligned with their latest product. So they've swapped out the badge for the Mazda lettering, and then the taillight design seems to ape the CX-60 quite a bit, which is to be expected. I think the biggest talking points with this car are probably the interior design and the powertrains. And so we'll talk about with the interior design firstly. Like, I think this is given what Mazda's philosophy has traditionally been. It's quite actually ironic that they've gone with the approach of almost every other OEM these days and just literally plonked a big 15.6-inch screen and sort of just called it a day, gotten rid of all the physical controls because you read some of the older Mazda press releases, even cars like the current Mazda 3 when it came out. And even you look at the design of the CX-60 series and its sibling SUVs on their sort of large rear-wheel drive architecture. And they all talk about this philosophy called Jinba Itai, which is horse at one with the driver. And what how that translates into an interior design perspective is like you have physical controls, you have a display that is ergonomically positioned in the driver's eye line, and it's things are geared towards the driver and making it easy for the driver to have their eyes on the road while they can manipulate the other controls. And this sort of having a huge screen just completely takes away from that. Like it's just, they've tried to follow Tesla and they've maybe put a slightly more premium spin on it with some of their interior color choices, and maybe they still have their conventional gear shift, but even the steering wheel they've gone with the haptic buttons again, which is not great. Like I really preferred the older Mazda steering wheel, like with the 3 and the MX-5. It looked had physical buttons, great diameter, and now they've just sort of gone away from that and used that typical one-piece design. So I might open the floor, but I'm not a fan of this car, to be honest.
Yeah, Sambip, what are your thoughts?
Look, I have a feeling that yes, people on the internet might complain that it's gone full touchscreen, it's gone past what Mazda used to say. Consumers actually quite like this touchscreen heavy approach. I believe in some of the PR pieces that Mazda has released and some of the talking points from their senior executives. They've basically said it's customers that are demanding this. It's not us that are forcing it upon them. It's the customers have told us we basically want large touchscreens that obviously control most of the functions. On top of that, they're also emphasizing the fact that you won't necessarily need to touch the touchscreen. Obviously, like most modern cars, voice control and speaking to your car basically to change functions is obviously going to be a very important way of interacting with the car. I do think that obviously its biggest rival in Australia and probably around many places around the world, apart from the places where Mazda isn't as big, the RAV4 is obviously going to be its biggest rival. Look, the RAV4, yes, it has a couple more physical buttons than there's CX-5, which is basically everything is on the touch screen. Yes, it has like temperature up and down physical buttons. The RAV4, I mean, obviously has a physical volume knob and a couple of other smaller buttons here and there. But like Mazda, because the RAV4 obviously compared to the old one has also pulled away from buttons. It's pretty clear that manufacturers are seeing that this button-free approach and just going to touch screens is definitely gaining them sales. And in general, I think that when anyone sits inside this new Mazda CX-5 when it launches next year, I doubt most customers will not be saying, oh, yes, I missed the physical buttons. Maybe older customers, when I'm saying old, I mean like really people in their 60s, etc plus, or maybe, but really the reality is most regular people who are in this car's target demographic will look at the interior and be like, this feels very expensive, very premium. The other big thing that's been made of it is obviously the engine. Now, the reality is that this is not a sports car. The vast majority of people who purchase cars like the CX-5 don't actually care about engine output. They know that it's adequate, and that's basically all they need. I believe that even for the current gen CX-5, the take up on the turbo option was relatively quite small compared to the naturally aspirated 2.5. On top of that, obviously, Mazda is promising to bring the new hybrid engine, which not only will obviously be more fuel efficient, but will be more powerful as well. So that's something that if there is anyone who who is interested, they will wait. They have to wait a while because it's launching in the US in 2027, could be 2028 till it gets here. But if someone wanted to do that, they could. So I reckon that this car will be a huge hit. Yes, the styling is not as classical as the old CX-5, but I reckon that in the flesh, I suspect it would still look quite striking. It bears some similarities with the new CX 60, 70, 80, and that design language seems to be popular with consumers. And as I said, yes, online you'll hear lots of comments about, oh, they've taken back physical buttons, but in reality, the vast majority of consumers either won't care or actually they'll actually prefer this new approach.
Sounds like you're on Team Mazda PR then, Sambu. You're fully in line with their thinking, which is yeah. I don't know. I mean, I personally, even though I'm not 60, I'm half that age, but I think I would miss the physical buttons. I think definitely from a aesthetic point of view, it looks leaps and bounds more modern than the previous generation, and I think that alone will sway some customers to come at least check it out in the showroom and play around with it. So I think they've definitely go for showroom appeal with this, and it makes sense when all the other manufacturers, especially the Chinese, are going towards larger screens. But I think if there are critical functions that are now buried in menus and difficult to operate while driving the car, then I think consumers will find faults with it. And we might see them going back, similar to what VW are doing with bring back balance. I mean, this topic's been talked about to death in, in a lot of different kind of cases from manufacturers, but I think there's a middle ground here between going full screen and keeping the buttons of previous generations. So yeah, I'm not sure. I think there might still be a little bit of backlash here, but I think at least at the very least they've kept a lot of the buttons on the steering wheel, and I think that kind of statement you alluded to, where they said based on customer feedback, we've tried to make it still relatively ergonomic with steering-based controls, even though a lot of the other functionalities within the touchscreens. So at the very least, if you're someone that likes buttons, you can still operate a lot of the functionality via the steering wheel, as I understand. But things like climate control, I think, at least in this case, the anchor to the bottom of the screen. But we've seen with some other models from the likes of BMW where if you want to go a little bit deeper with more customized aircon controls, you have to dive into menus, which really just isn't safe as you're operating the vehicle. It's just interesting how they've done a complete U-turn, right? Because they've gone from one of the manufacturers that have actually disabled the touchscreen while you're in motion
Yeah.
to now a
Mm,
manufacturer that is going all in on the touchscreen and making it the primary
mm,
point of interaction with the car while it's stationary or while it's in motion. So for them to do such a reversal is interesting. But
mm.
yeah, we'll see if the consumers are actually providing this feedback and are actually in line with what they've been saying, then I suppose it won't be much of an issue.
It's interesting, like, before they had their, they even had a controller that was sort of their version of BMW's iDrive controller, and now they've completely gotten rid of, like 90% of physical controls. But I think to Sandbip's point about RAV4 and the powertrain, that really lets the side down, in my opinion. Like, the powertrain that this car is coming with, it's even the naturally aspirated 2.5 liter engine. It's even a downgrade compared to the outgoing model. If you compare like for like, the power and torque figures are slightly down, and this car is likely to be a heavier as well, as most new cars are. And then the fact that the hybrid system is not coming out for a while. And you look at what rivals, so especially the Toyota RAV4, that will launch early to mid 2026, and that's going to be all hybrid, even on the base model. So likely much more fuel efficient, likely much smoother to drive because you have that instant torque provided by the electric motor, much quieter. And then on the top end, you have the plug-in hybrid powertrain. And Mazda has not mentioned PHEV CX-5 at all. So that's not even, they're not even playing in the same space
So you've got Toyota obviously, but then you've also got MG with their new, is it the HS, which is in the
Yeah,
similar category, which is now a super hybrid apparently. That's what they're
mm,
calling it.
Yeah.
So they've got
yeah,
to deal with that threat as well. They've got
yeah.
Nissan with the X-Trail that have got their own
E-Power.
e-power as well. So is there anyone else that's operating? I guess Hyundai, have they brought a hybrid for the
Yes, they have
Tucson?
hybrids for the Tucson, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, and so does Kia for the Sportage as well. So,
And the
yeah.
Sorento, yeah.
so like where you see like all of the mainstream, even MG is like I would say is a mainstream brand these days. Like they're all, everybody is going hybrid. And meanwhile, Mazda, at least in the Australian market, is still sticking with this very outdated combustion engine only approach, at least, and they'll have to until later this decade. So that's, I think that's going to be a real letdown. Like you, even Kia, Hyundai have efficient hybrids. Honda in the CRV has in the ZRV has a hybrid option available. Even Nissan with the X-Trail and the Qashqai, they have the e-power hybrid. So like literally, almost literally every mainstream competitor, and not just from the Chinese and Korean brands, or even the other fellow Japanese brands, are all having hybrid options already. And meanwhile, Mazda is still sticking with this 2.5 liter engine that they've had for, since the existing CX-5 came out for, back in almost, when was it, 10 years ago or so, or however long ago it was.
I think
So,
they've wasted a lot of time with different variations of Sky Active. They had a
yeah.
was a high compression Sky Active.
Skyactiv X, right? Or
Yeah, in the
whatever
Mazda
it was
3
called.
that
Yeah.
they haven't done anything after that with that
Yeah.
kind of framework for an engine. So
Yeah.
I think they've only got themselves to blame. Mazda have a history of going down unconventional engine paths, especially with their
Yeah.
rotary
Yeah.
powertrains. So maybe it's part of their heritage and they want to do things a little bit differently. But I think it's going to cost them now, given that
Mm.
they're playing catch up with the rest of the market when it comes to
Yeah.
just conventional hybrids.
Yeah. And the other point I'll make just to wrap this up is, they're saying our hybrid is going to come out in 2027, 2028, and it'll have better performance than the current naturally aspirated engine, which is, I'm happy to give them the benefit of the doubt. It's probably going to be the case, but again, this is the first generation in-house hybrid powertrain that's going to compete with Toyota, which has been refining their hybrid technology for decades now. Honda has had hybrid for on and off, but even then, their latest hybrid technology has been received very well. Nissan has even improved their initial version of the e-power hybrid with the second and third generation that will be coming up in the Qashqai next year. So yeah, this is like a debut hybrid powertrain competing against likely, much more mature options from their Japanese rivals. So yeah,
Yeah. Let's see how they end up.
yeah,
Yeah, for Mazda's sake, as a nice brand and one that's been an Aussie favorite for a number of years. I hope they do well with this model, but I think the sooner the hybrid can come, the better for them.
mm,
All right, let's move on to the new Bentley EV. So the EXP 15, it's their first full-scale preview of their new design direction and their EV ambitions. So they're following the trend that we've seen with a few different models of an elevated sporting sedans, the likes of the Volvo ES90, I suppose the Toyota Crown sedan. Yeah, this kind of odd space between an SUV and a sedan, with demand obviously shrinking quite considerably for their full-scale sedans with the likes of the Mulsanne and Arnage and other famous models of the past probably no longer being in favor with consumers. So they're going in a little bit of a different direction, but it could just be a design study. We don't know if there'll be a production version of this. So some other key interesting features. It's actually three doors. So I think the driver's side has one long door and the passenger side has two doors, which is an interesting take on things. It's still got, all the nice kind of Bentley trademarks that you'd expect from them, with them really leaning into their British craftsmanship, nice materials, wool, 3D printed titanium, all of that good stuff. But it's really changed things up in terms of the design direction. So you no longer got those circular headlamps that they've been iconic for across many, many years. Then I've got vertical LEDs at the front. At the rear, they've got that C-shaped LED signature, which I must say is a little bit generic and disappointing. I think it could easily be a Volvo or even a Kia for that matter, or any kind of model that's doing those kind of full leg light bars or C-shaped rear lamps. Um, but yeah, overall, I think it's at least an interesting first look at what Bentley's future is to come, to go up against the likes of Rolls-Royce with their Spectre. So, Sambib, what are your thoughts on this new direction for Bentley?
Ultimately, I think that these luxury manufacturers in the transition to electric are having to think of new, basically unique sort of selling points for these cars because obviously, during the days of the petrol engine, one of the main selling points was the fact that they could basically make it completely silent, like as in, yeah, the car would obviously be with the petrol engine, but thanks to clever noise cancellation technology and other clever sort of suspension, etc. technology. But now with the EVs, pretty much most EVs are silent. Yes, obviously, cheaper EVs have not as sophisticated noise insulation as the more expensive ones, but broadly speaking, it's not that difficult. So, and on top of that, they've also got the other problem that most luxury manufacturers have, where even a relatively speaking, a cheap or even mainstream brands or semi-premium brands are giving you interiors which, while they may not have the similar levels of materials, technology-wise, broadly speaking, they're all offering the same thing: large touch screens. If you even brands as cheap, look, well, Mercedes is expensive, but compared to this, it's cheap, and even they offer full screens for the passenger. And so now these brands have to be like, okay, what can we offer that other car manufacturers, even semi-premium car manufacturers like BMW and Mercedes can't offer. So it's pretty clear that some of it is just, and Jaguar is doing this as well, is just a design that absolutely, it's not really important whether it's good or bad, but it certainly makes you pay attention. Obviously, with this car, certainly from the front, but even from the rear, if you saw it on the road in the future, you'd be like, meaning like, oh wow, what's that car? Like, it's definitely a car that makes you sit up and be like, take notice. On top of that, now they're having to also go into more slightly different ways to, make it unique. They've mentioned how, back in the day, the grille was used as a way to obviously cool the engine. Now with an EV, there's no need for a grille to cool the engine. So now what are they doing? They're turning the grille into basically a digital art display. Now, okay, clever, but the reality is that you unlock the car, you might see the art, you'll be like, cool, and then you're inside the car, and that's it. It's something you can show your friends or like people that, oh, look at this amazing art that my car is doing, but there's no functional purpose to it. The cooler bit is the idea of, having a three-seat car. Certainly, it's not a traditional seating arrangement. Obviously, no one's buying this Bentley for a family car, so fair enough. But it's interesting that that they're like, okay, not two seats either, because they've obviously still gone full sedan shape. So let's put in three seats instead. And the idea being that every single seat has like its own significantly amount of its own spaces. So yeah, other than that, there's not much. The idea goes, I mean, there's a lamp in the middle. Apparently, if you look at the top-down shot, there's an atmospheric lamp in the middle that again, I don't know what the use of it will be, but a little party trick for the car. Apparently, storage options are plentiful, but that's for all EVs. And yeah, the swiveling chair, which the press release is hilarious. That um, thing, it allows you to get out with the dignity, and the Instagram shot is perfect. So it really shows you the kind of thing. They're not really necessarily going for, here's a functional reason why a car you should like is unique or is better than even semi-premium brands like Mercedes, BMW, etc. It's now just about aesthetics, the look that you want to have as a wealthy person who obviously would be in the market for this kind of car, etc. So yeah, we'll see. I've already said this before, but I don't know how big the market is for extremely premium EVs. So it will also have that natural competition where how many people are willing to spend 300,000 plus on an electric car would be in this sort of thing, but we'll see what the market says.
I
Do
mean,
they
I think an
actually?
electric motor. Oh, sorry. I was going to say I think an electric motor is actually quite well suited to this category of car.
Mm,
I think with the Spectre, we saw that previously they'd have big block kind of V12s in place that were extremely refined and perfectly suited to longer journeys. But with an EV, you've got that and even more when it comes to refinement and quietness and smoothness. So I think with this carrier car, it actually makes a lot of sense. But yeah, to your point, Sambit, uh, everybody that's putting an EV in their car can kind of deliver a similar experience now. How do these high-end brands really differentiate? Is it through
mm,
materials? Is it through leading to their heritage? Is it through some other technology that they can offer that maybe is too expensive for the mainstream? So I think it's a more challenging time than any other for these higher end brands. How do they actually compete when it's so easy to implement some of the kind of previously exclusive aspects of a luxury car into the mainstream? Sorry, Vivek, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say that they've actually directly mentioned Instagram in the press release, have they? So that's quite,
Yeah, I quoted that.
yeah, that's quite fascinating. Yeah, it really goes to the intended audience of this car, which is probably those young, sort of rich listers, some people who want impact. They want, something that grabs the attention. I think the most interesting comparison with this car is going to be to that new Jaguar Type 00 concept, which it's interesting. They both share, like, definitely share similar design characteristics. They have um, that bluff front end. They have that sort of C-shaped, that sort of GT design, not the most aerodynamic profile. If you're going sort of for EVs, which are, their efficiency and the range is often increased by having, low coefficient of drag. I think this car, the design priority probably wasn't having that sort of low drag coefficient. It's more on, okay, let's have this bluff front end to create that impact. So, and given, Jaguar is sort of rebranding its like entire sort of philosophy and its branding to be a lot more upmarket and to sort of position itself above the traditional German, trio of Audi, Mercedes-Benz, and BMW, and try to transform itself more into that sort of Bentley competitor, or be maybe a half step below Bentley. It will be interesting to see a direct comparison between these two vehicles, and especially the production versions of these two vehicles. I am very keen to see how much of this uh, design makes it to production. I am skeptical that the three-seat layout will make it. I feel like they'll either go with a two-seat layout or they'll go with a 2+2. Three-seat layout is very innovative, and it would be cool if they kept the swiveling seat, but I wouldn't be surprised in the slightest if they didn't. Yeah, I think the interior design is quite interesting as well. They've sort of Bentley have sort of had this inspiration from their badge, really, which is that winged bee logo, and that sort of translates a little bit into the design of the interior. They've sort of divided it up between the driver area and the front passenger area, and they've put in that sort of vertical trim, and then that flows out into more of like a winged design, and the portrait orientation of the infotainment display definitely helps with that. So I can see how they've tried to attempt to modernize that language and still hark back to some of their history. So I think that's a nice touch. Definitely looks luxurious, and it seems that they have kept physical controls. Like even in the concept, they have the volume jogs and an iDrive-esque style controller, it seems. So I think that's a good step. It seems like a good balance between technology and usability. Let's see what the production model is like, and especially the comparison to the Jaguar. So
Can I ask, Sambib, did you prompt
Yeah.
ChatGPT to say it was a perfect car to go from Byron Bay to the Dandenongs? Or did it come up
No,
by
I didn't.
itself?
That just came up by itself.
No way. There
Yep,
is
it
no
did.
way. I cannot believe that at all.
Yeah.
There's actually no way it can make it from Byron Bay to the Dandenongs. And I wouldn't be wanting to drive that car in the Dandenong area anyway, but that's a story for another day.
Nice little touch there. Nice little touch there.
Yeah. For the audience context, we are using a set of slides that Sandviv has conveniently generated through ChatGPT, and this is proof that you can't rely on AI for everything because it has literally asked um
If Sabib did not prompt this, then it's using his history. He's clearly had a lot of prompts to do with the Dandenongs
yeah,
for it.
which is funny because he doesn't even live in Melbourne. But anyway, but like so the point that ChatGPT has come up with is the tailgate doubles as picnic seating with champagne cooler, perfect for Lux coastal outings from Byron Bay to the Dandenongs. Well, the first part of the sentence be true, but they say the coast, but it's in a completely different state. Dandenongs is not near the coast, so nowhere near. So
This
nowhere
is
that's yeah. I
clearly
think
living in a
Sandviv's a bit
fantasy
obsessed with
land.
I
Yeah.
think when it says the
yeah.
Dandenongs,
And
it
then,
probably just refers to the ranges rather than the
well,
city. But yes, you're right.
regardless, even the Rangers aren't near the coast, so yeah. So like in either way, like there's and what would the distance from the Dandenongs to Byron Bay would be like? That's like 1,000 kilometers. Like
Probably more than that.
yeah, more
So
than that.
yeah,
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know what.
Lucky they haven't mentioned the range of this car. So
Yeah.
that seems very unrealistic. Maybe it's a super economical and maybe it can go like
Solid state.
3,000 Ks, who knows?
Solid state battery.
Yeah. All right, I think that's enough about the Bentley, but no, it's I think it's an interesting time ahead for them and for the luxury car makers. So yeah, let's see if any of the elements within this concept make it into production cars in the near future.
Yeah.
All right, let's have a chat about the mad news that has been surrounding the world of F1 in the last week or so. So let's probably first chat about the British Grand Prix, which in itself was quite a chaotic race. So as a bit of a recap, British Grand Prix always a great track there at Silverstone, lovely kind of flowing circuit that always leads to great racing action. But you add that in the mix and also rain as well, and you end up with an absolute classic. So what we saw is initially quite a mix of strategy between tires. So you had basically half the field on inters and the other half still on dry tires. And I think the inters kind of won out in the first part of the race. Then you had, a bit of action at the front there. So a great battle between Oscar and Verstappen, really quality racing that led to Oscar passing Max just before the rain hit. And then you actually saw Norris battling Verstappen as well, where Verstappen actually went off when his Inters kind of hit the cliff a little bit. So again, another great battle there. Eventually, we led to a little bit of a predictable result with a McLaren 1-2, although even though Piastri was probably the faster driver on the day under the safety car, he did actually end up
break.
infringing the rules and actually braking with too much pressure and actually leading to some unsafe behavior in the eyes of the stewards and catching Max Verstappen out. So similar to the incident between Max and George a few weeks ago, but I think the stewards deemed that this is a little bit more unsafe when it came to the braking pressure and given the conditions as well. But apart from the Domino 1-2, we saw a fantastic result for Nico Hülkenberg. I think a result that basically every F1 fan and every driver was extremely happy with. So finally a podium for the veteran after what 15 years in F1. He finally got that monkey off his back and managed to get that elusive third place. So hopefully that now opens up the doors for a few more podiums in the near future, especially with the transition to Audi next year. But I think that basically only scratches the surface. There was a bunch more that happened in the race. So Sam, do you want to take us through all the other details that might have happened?
Yeah, so it was pretty much clear that it was based on tire strategy because was basically when watching the race, and they were saying in commentary, there were certain parts of the track that were dry, and then I think the third sort of area of the track that was wet. So basically, the gamble was that could people, would you just risk not like would you risk putting on the soft tires, which some teams did, so that you could go fast in the first two sections of the relatively dry track, and then obviously risk it with the third, or just play it safe with the by just putting on the intermediates, basically. So what we found was that it was pretty clear that the people that actually stuck with the intermediates rather than moving on to the soft tires or the slick tires, basically, they did struggle. A bunch of the rookies actually basically crashed and basically they had to pull out of the race. So this idea of trying to take that gamble didn't often pay off. So that was the main issue there. Obviously, and in fact, Hülkenberg and stuff, basically, one of the reasons he did so well was because his tire strategy was extremely good. They basically made all the correct calls. And like at the end, it was also up to his driving where he had to hold off Hamilton to keep his third place. But certainly, the reason he was even put in third because he qualified 19th, so it was an incredible jump. It's not like he even did well in qualifying and had to move up much. So here it was basically very clever tire strategy and some very determined driving at the end to basically for Hülkenberg to keep his third and keep Lewis Hamilton off his back. And yeah, that pretty much made the race quite interesting because there were multiple safety cars due to the accidents that were occurring on the track. And obviously the biggest one was Max Verstappen. While he didn't obviously like lose his car, he did spin out and therefore temporarily got into 10th and then I believe moved up to 5th by the end.
Yeah.
But, that was probably from some frustration from being, that surprise from Oscar Piastri that obviously got penalized for afterwards that might have prompted that, where he might have been a bit too aggressive and then spun out. But yeah, overall, I think everyone was just speaking about the fact that Nico Hülkenberg came in third. That was pretty much the story of everything about this race. Everyone was
Even
obviously very happy.
even Lance Stroll was up there for quite a bit of time. He was in third, really kind of looking quite
Yeah,
good
yeah,
for a
yeah.
podium for a long time.
Some of the teams, it was all about tire strategy. So the teams that basically didn't risk it, or some of the teams basically risked it with one driver and didn't risk it with their other drivers. So I believe Leclerc and Hamilton were a good example, where Hamilton more or less stuck with the Inters, and then Leclerc was put onto the softs, and that caused them to lose positions quite rapidly, which is why Hamilton came in fourth, and I believe Charles Leclerc came in 14th, even though in qualifying they were just one position apart, fifth and sixth. So it's a good example of how the tire strategies actually meant different tire strategies meant that one driver was very successful and the other driver obviously lost significant amount of places.
Yeah, yeah. I'm happy for Hülkenberg. I think definitely a driver that deserved a seat in a more competitive car over the course of his career. I mean, he's had opportunities to have podiums. I think there was a race in the German Grand Prix a few years ago where again it was wet and he was in the podium places and he unfortunately spun off the track. So he's had his chances, but he's also driven really well for a really long time. So I'm glad that strategy kind of worked in his favor this time around, and it's a good guy. I think you want to see good things happen to good guys, and I think that this is definitely someone that really deserved to finally get that monkey off his back. So yeah, hopefully a much better results in the future for him too. But yeah, as you said, with kind of Max finishing fifth and Tsunoda once again out of the points, we've been seeing Red Bull slide down the field down to fourth, and then yeah, in the last couple of days, we heard the bombshell news that the 20-year team principal of Red Bull, Christian Horner, has been sacked, and yeah, it's sent shockwaves through the F1 world. Lauren McKee's the team principal of Racing Bulls has had to step up. And now we have, no idea really what's going to happen to Christian. Is he going to find another role at Ferrari or perhaps Alpine, who are still looking for a team
Aston Martin,
principal?
I've heard as well.
Aston Martin. So Very, very interesting times ahead. But Vivek, what was your first reaction when you heard the news?
Yeah, just shocking. I think yeah, Christian Horner has been such a stalwart of Red Bull, like, really helped them achieve consistent performances in the past. Basically, he's an icon of the Red Bull team alongside Max Verstappen, I'd say. So the fact that he's just been what seems like he's been unceremoniously sort of dumped, partway through the season. Like, it's not like he retired or something, or it doesn't seem like it was his own decision. It seems like clear sort of political struggle, or there's political machinations that are happening behind the scenes. So, maybe there's like a power struggle between um, Max Verstappen and Christian Horner, or maybe Max Verstappen, given how dominant he has been in the past, has the final say and saying like, okay, I think Christian Horner is not doing a good job, then if I want him to walk, he walks. So um, I think there's definitely obviously some clear drama happening behind the scenes. I'm interested to see what happens with Red Bull going forward. From a broader perspective, new regulations coming in next year, so that's going to play a huge factor as well. They don't have the like this sort of guiding hand anymore that Christian Horner was. So it'll be interesting to see who they replace him with. Like Christian Horner, from what I know, was well known as being like the extremely competitive, to the point that he would play just inside what's sort of legally allowed in the current F1 rules and regulations.
He was
So
a great shit stirrer as well, you know.
exactly, yeah. So are they going to go with somebody with that same sort of drive and personality? Are they going to go with somebody who takes a softer approach, and less provocative? Let's see what happens. So yeah.
The funny thing is, his it was his decision, I believe, to Red Bull setting up Red Bull powertrains and becoming their own engine manufacturer next year. So he's made the
Mm,
decision. They've poured all that investment into setting up their
mm,
own factory just for engines. They don't even have, a road car company. They've got a one-off kind of road car designed by Newey, but
yeah.
not necessarily a road car uh, arm of their company. So it's not like other
Yeah.
manufacturers that are using that engine technology or using learnings from it for their road cars. So
Mm,
yeah, they basically just said, good luck. Thanks for the last 20 years. We're gonna go in our own direction, while they have to live with the decision that Christian kind of made, I think a couple of years ago now. So yeah, it'll be very,
mm,
very intriguing to see how they go next year as a manufacturer, engine manufacturer, and a powerhouse team as well, without someone that's basically led them to all their success over the years. How do you think they will go, Sambib?
It wholly depends on Verstappen's decision and who. Obviously, Yuki Tsunoda won't be there next year. They're simply, I assume, not kicking him out yet because they have bigger fish to fry, so to speak. But it'll depend on if Verstappen stays. They'll need a strong second driver. Now, strong second driver has obviously been very difficult to find. Like I said, Perez was actually good up till 23. He was solid. But since then, they've really found it difficult. They might have to take another experienced driver from another team, maybe. I don't know if they'd be willing to pay the amount of money that they need to do that. But that's the only way I can see them returning to the top of the constructors. Otherwise, if they have a similar, even with Verstappen, he can't on his own pull them here. And on top of that, even the World Drivers' Championship, because of the fact that McLaren and stuff, at least this year, we don't know about next year's cars, especially given Red Bull is getting a different powertrain, what their car will be like. But hopefully, yeah, it'll just be interesting next year what happens. But yes, the rumors are about Verstappen going to Mercedes. If they end up being true, then it's a disaster for Red Bull. If they don't end up being true, then yeah,
I
might
think
we'll
I
see.
I,
think you've nailed it right there. If Verstappen goes, then it's an absolute disaster. And they're kind of, I think, hoping that with this move, Verstappen does stay, and there's some good change that's brought about that allows the car to be maybe a little bit more drivable. by the two drivers, and they can actually be a two-car team again, and not just a Verstappen only team, which works when the car is, actually competitive, at least in the window of competitiveness. But as we've seen this year, if it's not even in that window, you can't have one guy winning the odd race and the other guy never finishing in the points.
I think, uh, yeah, I think as from a strategic perspective, like you just look at the fact that, obviously, yes, F1 drivers have long careers, but not as long careers as like team principals, especially when they're so iconic, like Christian Horner was. And it is Christian Horner who is managing like the rest of the business, making these big strategic decisions, developing drivers, helping to find out, okay, this is the next up and coming driver, this is the next up and coming talent. So even like from a broader sports management perspective, I think it's quite a short-sighted decision to follow. If it turns out to be the case that it was Max Verstappen that caused like the firing of Christian Horner, I think, and the Red Bull as a whole just decide to step in behind Max Verstappen, and then you see Max Verstappen leave at the end of this season. That would be such a like, yeah, to your point, Adash, it would be such a disaster, but one that could have been entirely avoidable or mitigated by keeping Christian Horner on. So I think, like, obviously it is Max Verstappen who's bringing in the points, bringing in the money, and you can't deny that. Like fundamentally, like he is the one driving the car and winning or doing well in the races. Yes, that's true. But it is Christian Horner who is so valuable in the rest of the business. And, he's been there for 20 years. He knows the team like the back of his hand. I think that's a huge factor that they're going to miss. So I think it's a big risk. And if they screw up next year, they have nobody to blame but themselves. So
All right, I'll finish up by asking everyone where they think um, Christian will end up. So I'm gonna say Alpine. What about you, Sam?
I'll possibly say Aston Martin. We know that they've got Adrian Newey. I don't necessarily know if they mind too much about getting someone with someone with his experience could really help build up the team. So yeah, Aston Martin.
yeah.
Vivek?
I think I'm gonna go with Sandbib here and also say Aston Martin. From what I understand, Aston Martin's, mid sort of table team, so to speak. They clearly have the money. They have the resources. They just need somebody who's just, has that ultra competitive drive. And I think Christian Horner, like he can handle uh, Lawrence Stroll's uh, demands as the billionaire owner of the team. So yeah, I reckon Aston Martin is probably the next step, and it'll be, if that is the case, it'll definitely be an interesting showdown next season. So yeah.
Yeah, we'll see if Newey vetoes it or not. I think one of the rumors for why he left Red Bull was he probably didn't want to work under the leadership anymore, even though they were so tight for so long. But
Mm,
I think it will be nice to see the team back together and seeing what they can achieve at a totally new team. It would be pretty cool if they could bring Aston Martin to the top.
mm.
All right. Thanks, guys, for another episode of The Hook Turn. We'll be
Thank
back
you.
again next week.
Thank you.